Nashville, known as the Music City, awoke that morning to its usual rhythm. The freshness of spring filled the streets, and no one could have anticipated that, only hours later, the sound of gunfire echoing through the hallways of a school would permanently alter the city's collective memory. Describing a tragedy as an apocalypse can at times be insufficient. What occurred that day at the Covenant School was not merely a physical attack, but a severe blow to public safety and the innocence of children. The assailant was not a random outsider, but someone who had once known those corridors as a student. What kind of darkness could drive an individual to turn classrooms tied to childhood memories into targets? In light of official records and law enforcement findings, the life history of Audrey Elizabeth Hale reveals a long-developing and complex psychological trajectory, shaped by persistent struggles related to identity, social belonging, and emotional regulation. Hale was born on March 24, 1995 in Nashville, and spent early childhood years at the Covenant School, where elementary education was completed. Years later, this same location would become central to the events under investigation. After graduating from high school, Hale earned a bachelor's degree in graphic design from Nashville College of Art. Professionally, Hale's working life remained limited in scope, consisting primarily of freelance graphic design work and delivery-based employment. Up until the day of the attack, Hale had no criminal history. There were no prior arrests, charges, or documented acts of violence. The only known interaction with law enforcement before the incident occurred, when Hale provided a statement as a witness to an accidental discharge at a shooting range. Those familiar with Hale consistently described a person who was socially withdrawn and reserved. In the period leading up to the attack, Hale publicly expressed thoughts related to gender identity and began using the name Aiden in online spaces. At the same time, official documentation, including autopsy results and state records, identified Hale as biologically female. These parallel realities reflect the broader identity-related tensions present in Hale's later writings and behavior. Investigative findings make clear that the attack was not the product of an impulsive decision made on the day it occurred. Materials recovered from Hale's residence, including written documents and detailed drawings, demonstrated that preparations had been underway for several months. Handwritten notes and maps showed a methodical examination of the school's physical layout. These materials included marked entrances and exits, observations about security vulnerabilities, and considerations regarding movement within the building. The investigation further established that Hale had legally purchased 7 firearms from local retailers without the knowledge of family members. 3 of these weapons, 2 rifles and 1 handgun, were carried and used during the attack. Hale's familiarity with the school environment, stemming from prior enrollment, appears to have informed the choice of location. Available evidence indicates that victims were not selected individually or personally. Rather, those present in the hallways at the time of the attack became the targets. Was there a discernible motivation prior to the attack? What patterns of behavior preceded the incident? In order to understand how events progressed to this point, it is necessary to trace Hale's life from early childhood to the day of the attack. The most direct way to do so is through an examination of the writings and documents Hale left behind. Hale wrote biographical narratives in which emotional states ranging from moments of happiness to periods of intense sadness and anger were documented in detail. These notebooks contain Hale's thoughts, perceptions, and emotional responses over time. Within these writings, Hale frequently described struggles related to mental health and stated that these difficulties had been present since early childhood, beginning shortly after learning to walk. Hale described fear responses related to noise, groups of children, large animals, and heavy machinery in the following manner. From a very young age, Hale reported extreme sensitivity to loud sounds, writing that sudden or continuous noise triggered intense fear reactions. Noise was described as uncontrollable and physically painful, causing panic, trembling, and an urge to cover the ears. Hale further stated that groups of children were deeply frightening, explaining that multiple sounds and movements occurring simultaneously created a sensation of being trapped. While surrounded by groups of children, Hale reported an inability to calm down, accompanied by shaking, crying, and an overwhelming sense of insecurity. Hale also reported a persistent fear of large animals, particularly dogs. Barking sounds were described as causing widened eyes from fear and a sensation of the heart tightening. In some instances, the anticipation of barking produced more panic than the sound itself. During these moments, Hale reported burning sensations in the hands and face, racing thoughts, and episodes of freezing in place. Hale's mother observed developmental delays and suspected the possibility of autism. As a result, Hale was taken to a mental health professional at an early age. Psychological evaluations concluded that Hale did not meet the criteria for autism spectrum disorder. However, significant developmental delays were identified in areas of social expression, emotional processing, and anxiety indicators. Based on this assessment, Hale's mother postponed kindergarten enrollment by 1 year in order to allow social and emotional development to progress. As a result, many classmates were younger than Hale. During this period, Hale rarely participated in peer games and often preferred to remain on the periphery. During early childhood, Hale engaged intensively in drawing and explicitly described this identity as a young artist. Teachers and parents reported that Hale's artistic abilities were advanced relative to age. Hale attended the Covenant School from 2001 to 2006 through the 4th grade. Upon entering 5th grade, Hale transferred to Creswell Middle School, an arts-focused magnet school. This transition resulted in a pronounced cultural shock. Hale reported being labeled as a white girl, subjected to bullying, and mocked by peers. Despite these experiences, Hale emphasized the absence of academic or artistic difficulties. However, social exclusion contributed to a profound sense of loneliness. A notable shift occurred after Hale entered middle school. In 7th grade, Hale joined a school team, marking the beginning of a new phase. Although Hale was younger than most team members and identified as the only white student on the team, acceptance by the group was reported. Hale did not describe this acceptance as a standard team relationship, but rather as inclusion into a family-like structure. In writings, the team was depicted not as a biological family, but as a chosen family defined by trust, affection, and belonging. Team members were perceived not merely as teammates, but as individuals who valued, understood, and supported Hale. This bond created an emotional sense of security previously absent from social experiences. Within the team environment, a particular individual was perceived not through an official role, but as a guiding, protective, and empowering figure. Hale described this individual as a source of direction, emotional reassurance, and support during periods of difficulty. This figure was viewed as strengthening emotional resilience rather than physical development, emphasizing collective movement and belonging. According to Hale's descriptions, this individual played a central role in transforming the team into a structure based on mutual loyalty and care, fostering deep and lasting bonds among members. From this point onward, Hale's writings reflect an increase in belonging and a reduction in loneliness. The team became more than a sports activity. It became a space in which identity could be reconstructed, acceptance could be experienced, and personal value could be felt. Hale regarded several team members as closest friends and reported for the first time a belief in having formed genuine friendships. Hale also acknowledged developing romantic feelings toward some teammates. This period of belonging did not persist. The team advanced as far as a city championship, but ultimately lost. Despite the loss, Hale departed the experience with greater confidence than in previous years. However, this confidence eroded quickly. The following year, most teammates advanced to high school, leaving Hale separated from those described as closest friends. Hale again became a target of other students. Additionally, the team that had been perceived as family was less successful during Hale's 8th grade year, creating further disappointment. Over time, diminished self-esteem gradually transformed into anger. After middle school, Hale began attending Nashville School of the Arts in 2010. At the start of high school, Hale reported significant anxiety and repeatedly questioned personal ability to adapt, acceptance by others, and the possibility of belonging. Hale wrote concerns such as, "What if I cannot adjust to this new environment? Will people accept me as I am? What if I cannot keep up? Will I feel at home here like everyone else? What if I find loyal and trustworthy friends who truly make me feel at home? Will I belong somewhere? Or will I be abandoned? Will this change be good or bad?" Subsequently, Hale encountered former middle school teammates at the new school, including an individual toward whom romantic feelings had previously existed. Hale reported questioning whether the experience felt real or dreamlike. Hale described intense excitement upon hearing repeated expressions of, "I missed you so much." Later, observing an individual referred to as a big sister, introducing Hale to others contributed to a renewed sense of protection and safety. Hale wrote that nothing more could have been wished for at that time. This sense of security was short-lived. Hale perceived that former teammates abandoned Hale like a broken toy, believing that Hale was no longer needed because they had matured. Hale reported that teammates became distant and appeared arrogant. Hale expressed distress over perceived gossip and judgment by trusted friends, stating that these experiences reinforced feelings of worthlessness. This resulted in renewed disappointment and increased social isolation. During this period, Hale reported first experiencing suicidal thoughts. In response, Hale's mother recognized that something was wrong and arranged therapy in 2011. Psychological assessments identified severe depression, generalized anxiety, and social phobias. Despite earlier suspicions, autism was again ruled out. From this point forward, Hale's life continued with regular therapy and medication. Although academic performance improved somewhat following medication, emotional and social development showed no significant change. Hale maintained limited contact with former middle school friends, while romantic expectations diminished further. Hale graduated from high school in 2014, and shortly thereafter enrolled at Nashville College of Art, pursuing graphic design. In writings, Hale explicitly stated a reluctance to attend college due to negative prior educational experiences. Hale's mother, believing higher education was necessary for future independence, insisted on enrollment. During this period, Hale continued living at home and attended classes part-time. Initially, Hale did not work, focusing entirely on education. Hale reported strong enjoyment of graphic design coursework, but experienced significant difficulty with required core classes. These academic struggles coincided with further distancing from former middle school teammates, many of whom attended other universities and pursued different interests. Hale wrote of difficulty forming lasting friendships at Nashville, describing connections as limited to classroom interactions rather than shared interests. These peers did not meet the internal standards formed around earlier friendships, deepening loneliness and damaging self-esteem. Hale wrote of beginning to believe that romantic relationships and close friendships would never occur again. Anger became directed toward former teammates who were labeled bad friends and accused of abandonment. By early 2017, academic stress, loneliness, and hopelessness began affecting Hale's physical health. Weight dropped to a dangerous level, causing concern among family and therapists. On professional recommendation, Hale entered a 6-week eating disorder clinic in the summer of 2017. Physical health improved during treatment, weight stabilized, and eating patterns partially normalized. Temporary reductions in anxiety and depression were observed, leading to short-term academic improvement. However, loneliness persisted and social withdrawal intensified. During this period, Hale's perception of Hale's father shifted from disappointment to anger. Hale began attributing mental health struggles to paternal responsibility and blamed limited treatment options on this relationship. Hale also began obsessively monitoring former middle school friends on social media, saving posts, and observing their lives from a distance. This behavior intensified loneliness rather than alleviating it. Hale became increasingly convinced that desired romantic relationships would never occur, and believed that former friends no longer cared. Following treatment, Hale began keeping journals at the therapist's recommendation. Starting in August 2017, these journals became a repository for loneliness, anger, fixation, and worsening depression. Despite ongoing therapy and medication, anxiety and depression increasingly manifested as anger. Hale also produced drawings reflecting internal emotional states. Regarding isolation, Hale wrote the following in personal journals. I fucking hate it when I try to be a friend and spend time with someone I love, but they don't reciprocate or feel the same just because I simply don't fit in. As loneliness and social isolation deepened, Hale began viewing stuffed animals as more reliable sources of comfort than people. Hale believed these objects would not abandon Hale, assigned names and personalities, and carried them during travel. Over time, these figures were transformed into characters within stories, animations, and digital content. These creations functioned as indirect expressions of loneliness and internal conflict. Additional behavioral changes emerged. Hale wrote about stealing small items from stores, and later described this behavior as a form of shopping addiction. Items of interest included video games, collectible cards, children's toys, art supplies, and stationery. Hale believed accumulating these objects temporarily eased anxiety and depression, and used this belief as justification for theft. Journal entries increasingly included thoughts of not wanting to live. These thoughts grew darker over time. Hale wrote about attempts at self-harm, including cutting wrists and attempts at suffocation. These actions did not result in severe physical injury or visible signs that would attract attention. Hale wrote that these attempts stopped due to the belief that death would result in being forgotten or uncared for. Hale described this period as a turning point, after which thoughts increasingly centered around suicide. In later writings, Hale recorded escalating anger under the heading Hate Note. These writings addressed themes such as social exclusion attributed to perceived autism, longing for acceptance, experiences of exclusion within Black culture, and political topics. The following sections reflect documentation of the progression from depression and anxiety into externalized anger. And also Hale said, "Were you picked on as a kid? Were you ignored by the friends you loved the most? Were you considered a lesbian to boys that didn't even really know you? Do you think you're not pretty enough to have a guy who's more toward your attributes? You want to pick any duck in the pond, all the way down to the shaggy bill hitting goose. You think you're not good enough, but you're not me. If you really knew my life, this is the white gay fag you look at. All the popular Black kids in middle school I befriended, because I didn't want to be friends with the white girl who didn't know how to even look at the white kids in the pool of loners. The white kids didn't bother but calling me a lesbian. I swear to God, if I was someone repulsive, I'd buy a gun, place it at my head and pull the trigger. Then we'd see who will be crying. 'Cause I won't. I'd like to see how it turn out. If I killed myself or died from my illness, then you'd feel sorry. My ED always told me, go ahead, plus kill yourself, you're gonna die anyway. There were so many times being at my sickest each day getting more sick, to the point 'cause I wanted to die so fucking bad. I wish my ED would kill me from starvation, but you don't know why." As anxiety intensified, anger shifted outward. Hale began fixating on former middle school friends, monitoring their lives and perceiving happiness without Hale's presence. This anger extended beyond individuals. In November 2017, Hale began watching documentaries on school attacks and researching such incidents, systematically examining perpetrators, methods, and public remembrance. The focus was not ideology or location, but visibility. A recurring conclusion emerged. These individuals were not forgotten. During this period, Hale reported first experiencing suicidal thoughts. In response, Hale's mother recognized that something was wrong and arranged therapy in 2011. Psychological assessments identified severe depression, generalized anxiety, and social phobias. Despite earlier suspicions, autism was again ruled out. From this point forward, Hale's life continued with regular therapy and medication. This fear had appeared earlier during eating disorder-related writings. At this stage, Hale began believing that another path to recognition was necessary. Hale explicitly referenced Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, the perpetrators of the Columbine High School attack on April 20, 1999, in which 12 students and 1 teacher were killed. More than 20 individuals were injured, and both perpetrators later died by suicide. Subsequent evaluations described Harris as exhibiting psychopathic traits, and Klebold as experiencing severe depression. Hale researched additional attackers using publicly available records, focusing on locations and casualty numbers. Other perpetrators were dismissed as amateurs based on comparative victim counts and were described as undeserving of respect. Over time, these fantasies progressed beyond abstract thought and began resembling intent. Anger continued to intensify. I am not enough. You think you are? Get real. It is not like you feel that way to your boyfriend and all your best friends who want to be with you and actually spend real quality time. You have a bridge to cross and have fun with friends and relationships. Mine is broken. I am left there, and no one gives a fuck. This perceived indifference escalated into a belief that attracting attention required an extreme act. Hale began expressing the belief that killing a group of children would bring an end to perceived invisibility. Not long afterward, in December, Hale began preparations for an attack at Creswell Middle School. Hale documented the school's layout, common areas, classrooms, and all entry and exit points, and recorded school arrival times and possible methods of entering without being noticed. The plan extended even to the location where suicide was contemplated after the attack. In early 2019, Hale continued planning despite not yet knowing precisely how to carry out the attack. The more Hale focused on operational details, the more Hale's internal belief in achieving a successful outcome appeared to increase, and anger escalated in parallel. However, an event occurred that interrupted this trajectory. Hale's therapist recognized the escalation in anger and concluded that Hale's behavior had shifted beyond what could be concealed. Over time, Hale disclosed thoughts related to suicide and fantasies involving harm to others, but immediately emphasized that none of these thoughts had developed into a concrete plan. Even with that denial, the disclosures constituted a serious warning indicator. Due to this concern, a comprehensive psychological evaluation at Vanderbilt University Medical Center was recommended. In June 2019, the evaluation confirmed previously known mental health conditions. Depression and anxiety were identified as major factors affecting Hale's mental state. No evidence of a psychotic presentation was found. Hale explicitly stated the absence of a plan to harm self or others, and stated that no means existed to carry out such actions. The center recommended participation in an intensive outpatient treatment program to address Hale's condition more closely. With additional encouragement from Hale's mother, Hale agreed to participate. The program lasted 8 weeks and was completed toward the end of the summer of 2019. During the same period, the retirement of Hale's long-term therapist created a further destabilizing factor. In the fall of 2019, Hale continued treatment with a new therapist. During this transition, accumulated anger and feelings of worthlessness became more pronounced. The belief that Hale was not cared about began functioning not merely as an emotion, but as a fixed cognitive conclusion. This shift contributed to a search for another pathway to being noticed. Within Hale's internal framework, the belief that attention would require a radical act began to strengthen. At the same time, there was a professional recognition of increased risk. The therapist assessed that anger was no longer a typical fluctuation in mood, and that a more uncontrolled and darker direction could be present. This recognition became the beginning of an intervention that altered the immediate course of events. The treatment period produced an outward appearance of partial stabilization. Hale's writing temporarily became calmer, and references to depression and anxiety decreased. However, this did not indicate sustained recovery. Rather, it reflected a temporary pause. Underlying factors related to personality structure, anger, and hostility toward society remained present. This temporary calm quickly dissipated. Intense anger returned, followed by a clear decline. Hale's references to a dark abyss were not framed as ordinary suffering, but as part of a process described as increasingly aggressive and difficult to control. Suicidal ideation returned, but no longer existed in isolation. A key shift occurred at this stage. Death was no longer conceptualized as an endpoint, but as a means. The objective was no longer limited to ending life, but to finding a method to make that end meaningful within Hale's own logic. Accordingly, Hale returned deliberately to prior mass attack concepts. This was not described as a single impulse, but as a recurring, reinforced, and ultimately chosen direction. At this stage, the focus was explicit, attracting attention and leaving a lasting mark. The renewed centrality of Columbine in Hale's thinking was not coincidental. The reason for identifying with those perpetrators was linked to perceived notoriety and permanence in public memory after the act. Within Hale's internal framework, those individuals were viewed as figures who had moved from insignificant to visible through violence. This viewpoint was adopted intentionally. The consideration of children as potential victims followed the same framework. This was not presented as symbolic or random. It reflected a desire to produce an outcome that would generate the strongest societal reaction and would be difficult to forget. The stated objective was not to end pain, but to create pain and through that, to eliminate perceived invisibility and become visible. Over the ensuing months, the darkness described in Hale's writings evolved from a thought into what Hale treated as a concrete pursuit. Hale weighed schools in Nashville one by one in Hale's mind, Potential targets included locations ranging from Harpeth Hall to Hillsborough. When Hale focused on Nashville School of the Arts, the idea that an attack there would be easy became a repeated fixation. Hale used a claimed sense of prior exclusion as a justification narrative for what was being planned. With respect to other schools, once Hale recognized insufficient knowledge and lack of operational familiarity, Hale withdrew. This step back was not framed as mercy, but as a matter of perceived operational inadequacy. By March 2020, Hale's plans centered on Creswell Middle School, displayed a form of hesitation. This hesitation was not related to the prospect of killing children. The concern was instead directed toward perception and post-incident interpretation. Hale feared being labeled racist due to the school's student demographics. Hale did not want others to shape the motive narrative after death and sought to maintain control over how the act would be explained. Despite this concern, Hale did not abandon the plan and cited negative experiences alleged to have occurred at the school as justification. During the summer and fall of 2020, Hale began researching AR-style rifles and shotguns. On October 30, 2020, Hale purchased a first firearm, a Smith & Wesson M&P 15 rifle, using funds obtained from federal student loans. Ammunition and accessories were acquired afterward. The firearm was stored in Hale's bedroom closet inside a protective case. At this stage, Hale began recording videos intended to explain motivations, referred to as room tapes. It is specifically noted here that these incidents did not involve a manifesto in the conventional sense. Hale aimed to record 13 videos but completed 12 before the attack. These recordings span approximately 14 months, with lengths ranging from 5 to 40 minutes. A portion of the videos consisted of farewell and explanatory messages directed to family and friends. The intended purpose was for these recordings to be delivered to the relevant individuals after Hale's death. Other videos were prepared as messages directed to law enforcement and the public. In these recordings, Hale described reasons for the attack and outlined the extent of detailed planning in Hale's own words. This framework appears not only in the recordings, but also in personal journals from the same period. In these entries, Hale argued that killing people was part of natural selection, as reflected in the following text. So wouldn't it be only natural I destruct on Harding or Harpeth? Only natural to backfire their hate in a cosmos of gunshells and bloodshed? Yes, Eric Harris was right. Getting rid of these unneeded stupid fucks in this society is righteous, because they are unworthy to live. I resent Christians, for I am no longer one. I'm assured I will not die alone. I will have my rifle, and I will have my BF Stewie held tight in my arms. But of all, you Christians will die too. Creswell has been one of the places I leave a shit ton of resentment for. Teachers, most of them, simply didn't care, and the kids, most of them, were arrogant, insecure, or both. I have a lot of bad memories from that place. Journal entries dated December 5, 2020 indicate a significant turning point in the preparation process. On that date, secretly acquired firearm accessories were noticed by family members. The process escalated into a confrontation within the household, triggered by a firearm case package being found in the trash. As reflected in Hale's notes, family members did not frame the situation as a broader public safety threat, but addressed it primarily through personal safety concerns and the risk of self-harm. The journals describe Hale's mother expressing fear that the firearm might be loaded and that an accident could occur. This response reflects a protective approach within the family context. However, the journals also indicate that Hale did not process this confrontation as remorse. Instead, Hale described the partial exposure of the secret as a form of relief that reduced internal pressure and enabled plans to proceed more smoothly. Hale's notes suggest that the family's response was not treated as a barrier, but as a situation that could be managed while maintaining secrecy. This stage illustrates the degree to which family and close contacts were kept unaware of the underlying intent. While the household attempted to intervene based on perceived risk of accidental harm, Hale's journals had already placed the firearm at the center of an act that Hale referred to as a historic tragedy. Weeks earlier, Hale also wrote about difficulty maintaining secrecy. I swear I hate to lie. I really hate if I have to lie not to get caught from what I am preparing to do. I have no choice but to, yet I suck at it. At this point, planning extended beyond concealment within the home. The conceptual scenario was already being moved into real-world action. The first concrete step in this concealed preparation was taken in December 2020. Hale conducted an initial field reconnaissance directed at Creswell Middle School. During a time when the school was closed, Hale traveled to the building, photographed entry doors, and began target analysis. Through an unknown method, Hale gained entry into the building and examined the interior layout in detail. The stated purpose was to align the building's current structure with past memories and clarify potential routes for entry, movement, or exit. Hale focused specifically on door construction and resistance. This focus reflected strategic preparation, including the possibility that forced entry might be required. Hale also recorded a planned attack date in a notebook. Planned attack date, 13 April 2022. In January 2021, Hale assigned a visual identity to the developing plan. Hale designed a personal logo referred to as Dark Abyss. According to Hale's own statements, the logo represented how depression had consumed Hale and how hope of escaping that darkness had been lost. Dark Abyss did not remain a private expression. Hale used the symbol as a visual identity for the planned attack. The logo was placed on notebook covers and file surfaces and repeatedly inscribed along the margins of notes. Eventually, Hale printed the design onto a t-shirt, treating it as a concrete object associated with the planned act. This was not framed as ordinary clothing, but as an item intended to be worn on the day of the attack and linked to the act itself. From this point onward, Hale increasingly framed suicide and the planned act as an unavoidable fate. Within this framework, Hale asserted that no reasons for living remained, and the process was described as moving into an irreversible path. The designed logo and adoption of fatalistic language reflect how the event was mentally constructed as a final scene. January 2021 also marked an expansion of the target scope. Hale began evaluating the Covenant School as a potential target. Using the same method applied to Creswell, Hale traveled to the building outside school hours and conducted exterior reconnaissance. Analysis again centered on entry points and door structure, consistent with technical preparation for possible forced entry. This reconnaissance was followed by a second weapon purchase on February 4, 2021. Hale purchased a 12-gauge Mossberg Maverick 88 inches pump-action shotgun from a firearms dealer using money saved from pet-sitting work. The conversion of routine income into weapon acquisition reflects structured progression of the plan. Shortly after the purchase, Hale's father became aware of the weapon and did not object to ownership. No data indicates that Hale's mother had knowledge of this purchase during the same period. Hale continued preparations using this separation of awareness within the household. Hale also positioned April 13, 2021 as a symbolic date. Journal content indicates that this date was not perceived as routine, but connected to an obsessive interest in prior school attacks, particularly Columbine. During this period, Hale decided to postpone carrying out the attack. Available documentation suggests that this postponement was not a withdrawal based on regret, but rather dissatisfaction with preparation and concerns about operational adequacy. Journal entries reflect intense anxiety about failure and an emphasis on preventing an unsuccessful outcome. Accordingly, Hale researched firearms training and advisory options in the Nashville area and contacted various firearms sellers. These steps indicate that the attack concept was not limited to a momentary outburst, but reflected a preparation process shaped over time, involving pursuit of technical capability. On April 8, 2021, Hale fully canceled the Creswell Middle School plan and changed the intended target to the Covenant School. Following this decision, Hale conducted a comparative analysis of both targets. This analysis focused on factors such as the physical structure and security posture of each school, the ages and demographic backgrounds of potential victims, and the anticipated public reaction after the attack. Based on this assessment, Hale identified the Covenant School as the more suitable target for three primary reasons. First, Hale believed the Covenant had a more geographically isolated setting than Creswell Middle School, and that this would provide additional time before intervention. Second, Hale believed that the school's status as a private Christian institution would generate greater notoriety. Third, Hale expressed concern that targeting Creswell Middle School, given a predominantly black student population, could lead to being perceived as racist. Hale assessed that such a perception would weaken control over how the incident would be interpreted after death and how the underlying motive narrative would be framed. During the period in which target selection was being finalized, another warning indicator emerged during therapy. In a therapy session in April 2021, Hale disclosed possession of a rifle. The therapist immediately objected to firearm ownership due to Hale's history of depression and suicidal fantasies. Hale stated that these fantasies belonged to the past and asserted the absence of a current risk of self-harm, noting that the therapist was persuaded on that point. After this session, Hale, according to Hale's own account, criticized Hale's own lapse for revealing evidence related to true intent and decided to be significantly more cautious about how much others would know about planning. From this stage forward, Hale took additional steps to conceal accumulated ammunition and equipment, as well as writings and research materials compiled during preparation. In parallel, Hale began seeking firearms that could be concealed more easily. The stated purpose was to prevent parents from being able to seize weapons in the event of a future mistake. On April 16, 2021, Hale purchased a Kel-Tec Sub 2000, a 9mm caliber carbine, from a firearms dealer. Hale completed this purchase using remaining funds from a federal student grant after educational expenses had been paid, and stated that both parents were kept unaware. On June 11, 2021, Hale purchased a Mossberg Shockwave, a 12-gauge pump-action firearm, also using remaining federal student grant funds after educational expenses. Afterward, Hale began acquiring and accumulating ammunition, magazines, and other firearms-related equipment with the stated intent of using these items during the attack. In late June 2021, Hale's plans were postponed once again by family and the therapist. During this period, Hale's mother noticed that the Columbine diaries had been purchased through Amazon, prompted by delivery activity at the home. After learning the nature of the material being read and recalling that at least one firearm was in Hale's possession, Hale's mother informed the therapist. In late June 2021, Hale's plans were postponed once again by family and the therapist. During this period, Hale's mother noticed that the Columbine diaries had been purchased through Amazon, prompted by delivery activity at the home. After learning the nature of the material being read and recalling that at least one firearm was in Hale's possession, Hale's mother informed the therapist. Following this development, a meeting took place involving Hale, family members, and the therapist, with firearms as the central focus, and Hale's mental condition and safety risks were reassessed. This development triggered a meeting specifically addressing Hale's firearms. During this discussion, fantasies involving killing Hale's father were disclosed. In response, the therapist and family persuaded Hale to surrender firearms. The firearms were then transferred to parents for secure storage. The therapist also recommended evaluation at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, VUMC, in order to determine the most appropriate course of action. Hale accepted the recommendation unwillingly. The temporary loss of firearms generated anger, particularly directed toward the therapist. On July 7, 2021, Hale purchased a Smith & Wesson M&P Shield, a 9mm semi-automatic handgun, from a licensed firearms dealer and perceived this purchase as a form of retaliation. To finance the purchase, Hale used remaining funds from federal student loans and paid the remaining amount by credit card. Hale successfully concealed this handgun purchase from both family and the therapist. After the VUMC evaluation, Hale chose to work with a different therapist and began sessions within a few months following the assessment. After Hale agreed to Hale's mother's demand that firearms be sold and that a lack of intent to self-harm be demonstrated in a serious manner, parents returned the seized firearms to Hale on July 23, 2001. Hale sold 2 firearms. On December 7, 2021, Hale sold the Smith & Wesson M&P 15 rifle to a private buyer contacted through Arms List. Around December 13, 2021, Hale sold the Mossberg Maverick pump-action firearm to a firearms retailer. In contrast, Hale did not sell the Kel-Tec carbine, the Mossberg Shockwave, or the Smith & Wesson semi-automatic handgun. The temporary removal of firearms strengthened a decision to operate more cautiously moving forward. As a result, Hale decided to purchase firearms that could be concealed more easily due to size and/or folding or disassembly features. Hale created concealment spaces within the bedroom to prevent discovery of items, deleted search histories on phone and computer to prevent the mother from noticing research activity, and managed planning-related spending more carefully to avoid attracting attention. After selling 2 firearms, Hale continued training and practice at shooting ranges, but chose to rent firearms at the range and purchase ammunition on site in order to avoid bringing evidence back to the home. The temporary removal of firearms pushed Hale toward increased caution, while also strengthening determination to carry out a school attack and to plan an attack against the Covenant effectively. On September 14, 2021, Hale visited the Covenant School and requested a tour. The request was explained on the basis of being an alumnus seeking to revisit elementary years. The underlying purpose was to verify whether the interior layout differed substantially from memory. The school administration approved the request, and on September 18, 2021, Hale was escorted on a tour by a staff member. During the tour, Hale discreetly photographed various interior points and recorded video of the tour. Hale specifically noted the library, corridors near classrooms, the sanctuary, and a large window in the second-floor sanctuary lobby facing the south parking areas. After the tour, Hale prepared a detailed map of the Covenant School layout. The map documented the intended entry point, the route to be followed inside the building, and the sequence in which classrooms would be targeted. Alternative routes were also identified to enable rapid redirection in the event of unexpected circumstances. Following this planning, Hale reevaluated the attack timeline. In notes, Hale recorded having selected an earlier date for 22 total, but choosing not to act at that time, using the following wording. Like I planned this year, I set an earlier date in case I didn't want to live through this shitty transition from college to professional careers. That date would be set tomorrow, April 27, 2002. Weird, I would have been okay dying tomorrow, but I chose to wait. I'm gonna ride it out a few more months. If by chance I get some freelance that isn't shitty, plus a job with good pay, it sucks living in this city now. This note indicates that April 27, 2022 was treated as a potential threshold date, but the act was not carried out on that date. During the same period, Hale assessed that additional training and practice were necessary for the outcome to align with expectations. Hale also believed time was needed for the perception among family that there was no longer a threat or concern to become firmly established. On this basis, Hale chose to postpone the attack further. Between January and May 2022, Hale began participating in formal firearms training programs at Royal Range, USA. According to investigative information, these were standard programs for new shooters focused on foundational marksmanship, techniques, firearm safety, and lawful defensive use of firearms. During this period, Hale researched multiple websites focused on shooting and marksmanship, and downloaded shooting drills believed, by Hale's own assessment, to increase capability in a mass attack context. Notes also reflect renting various AR-style pistols at ranges, in order to test different models and use these trials to decide which model to select. In parallel with range training, Hale continued reviewing documentaries, articles, and written materials about prior mass attacks. Hale focused particularly on school attacks and kept detailed notes evaluating what prior perpetrators did right or wrong during the act. Investigators assessed that these analyses were used to determine elements to consider in Hale's own planning. In journal notes, Hale linked success to the number of deaths and wrote that fewer than 10 deaths would be considered a failure, while the intended number was at least 40. In February 2022, Hale followed the prosecution of Travis Reinking, related to the April 22, 2018 Waffle House mass attack in Antioch, Tennessee, through televised broadcasts and online coverage from beginning to end. Hale stated that the trial was watched through live broadcasts or later released recordings, with the purpose of understanding what would follow if survival occurred or if capture happened while alive. Hale expressed serious concern about being captured alive during the attack, particularly fear of being disarmed by another person. This concern affected target selection. In Hale's assessment, the Covenant was preferred because resistance inside the building was believed to be less likely. Hale also prepared detailed contingencies for the possibility of capture alive. As part of this, Hale prepared a t-shirt intended for use during trial proceedings, containing handwritten statements and the Dark Abyss logo. This t-shirt was assessed as similar to clothing intended for use during the attack. Hale also wrote that a death sentence was not expected and that, in the event of imprisonment, death at the hands of other inmates was anticipated. While evaluating capture and trial scenarios, Hale calculated alternative contingencies not only for after, but also for before. Hale assessed that the plan could be disrupted if the covenant were closed, if preparations were discovered early, or if parents seized firearms again. Accordingly, Hale began developing emergency targets to enable an attack elsewhere if access to the main target failed. Hale feared that worsening depression could lead to suicide before the plan was completed, and assessed that the mother could detect stockpiling of firearms and ammunition and initiate seizure again. These concerns led to identification of alternative targets for scenarios in which the covenant was closed or the main plan was disrupted. Digital records and notes reviewed during the investigation indicate that potential targets were evaluated through the lens of shopping malls, major highway intersections, and public areas. During this period, mood became increasingly constricted and withdrawn. As preparations advanced, both the risk of discovery by family and the fear of losing control narrowed thinking into a more restricted range. The possibility of being caught again, or having firearms seized, again pushed planning toward harsher and more indoor-focused scenarios. Throughout fall 2022, Hale reviewed the existing attack plan and made adjustments. The internal route remained unchanged, and the minimum intended victim count of at least 40 remained. However, prior mass attack research contributed to a more rigid framework for method during execution. Hale concluded that continuous movement would be necessary during the attack. Notes reflect a decision not to remain in a single room, not to lock in place, and not to become confined at a single point. Even without certainty that everyone inside a room had been killed, Hale decided not to remain in any room for longer than 1 minute. During the same period, Hale examined distances between the Covenant School and nearby police stations and calculated how many minutes it could take for first responders to arrive. These calculations were intended to estimate the available time window during execution. Hale initially expressed discomfort about the presence of a fire station adjacent to the school. For a short period, Hale considered creating a small fire or explosion away from the school as a diversion, but the idea was abandoned quickly. In notes, Hale stated that a diversion attempt where leaving the scene would create a high risk of being stopped by a hero. Hale also recalled the failure of explosive devices in the Columbine attack and concluded that producing something better would not be possible. As a result, plans involving fire, explosives, or similar distractions were excluded entirely. From that point forward, Hale concentrated exclusively on the primary attack plan and decided not to allow any secondary scenario to introduce additional risk. This narrowed focus extended beyond timing and method and included evaluations of how and why potential targets inside the school were selected. Additional planning provides indicators regarding how and why potential victims were considered. Hale explicitly expressed a desire to kill children, but stated a belief that only older children, above age 7, were appropriate targets. Hale wrote that younger children were not old enough to understand the difference between good and bad, or how the world worked, and assessed that killing younger children would be especially cruel. Hale reiterated that as long as most victims were children, race, religion, sex, and other demographic features were not important. Hale explicitly acknowledged that none of the intended victims had committed any wrongdoing and stated the absence of a personal motive against those individuals. Despite that acknowledgement, notes reflect a belief that these deaths were necessary to give meaning to Hale's own death. These assessments indicate that target selection was not treated as limited to the moment of attack, and that the aftermath was structured in detail at least as much as the lead-up. Notes reflect distorted expectations regarding how Hale wanted to be remembered after the incident. Hale described post-attack fantasies in detail. In Hale's internal narrative, the act would lead to books being written and documentaries being produced. Hale believed that weapons and personal belongings could be displayed in museums and that the bedroom could become a memorial site visited by others. Hale treated the attack as a response to alleged exclusion and as a form of proof intended to make mental health struggles visible. In this context, Hale also planned in detail what would happen to personal possessions after death. In a prepared will, Hale specified distribution of many personal items ranging from toys to video games, but the primary focus remained the writings and video recordings produced over the last 3 years in connection with planning. Hale stated 3 reasons for wanting these materials published: documenting mental health problems, showing how diagnoses such as autism and feels or D, in Hale's wording, contributed to carrying out a perfect plan, and conveying to others assumed to have similar thoughts how an attack could be planned and executed. This framework also influenced concrete equipment choices in the final preparation stage. By December 2022, Hale, according to investigative records, began acquiring equipment intended for use during the attack. Hale purchased a tactical load-bearing vest from a military supply store in Nashville and planned to combine it with belt-mounted magazine pouches and multi-pocket military-style pants. This configuration was assessed by Hale as enabling the carrying of significant ammunition and equipment without a bag or backpack. Investigators assessed that this stage reflected movement beyond conceptualization and draft planning and into systematic construction of a violent act with calculated before and after components. By the beginning of 2230, Hale had selected 4 separate dates for the attack. Dates set for January and February were postponed for various reasons. By March 2000, according to notes, Hale concluded that postponement no longer served a purpose. Journal entries from this period reflect harsher language and an increase in anger and darker expressions. As the attack date approached, Hale revised the firearm selection intended for use. The initial plan involved carrying all 4 firearms. In a final review, Hale decided to remove the shotgun, Mossberg Shockwave, from the plan. Notes state the reason as difficulty achieving adequate accuracy with that firearm. Hale wrote that because the firearm was designed with a pistol grip and hip-fire configuration, use at most shooting ranges was restricted under safety rules. During open-area testing, Hale reported lower accuracy compared to other firearms. On this basis, Hale chose to proceed with firearms considered more effective. Prior to the attack, the only known contact with law enforcement occurred on March 23, 2023. Hale was present at a shooting range during an accidental discharge incident involving another individual. Law enforcement briefly questioned Hale. Hale was released after it was determined that no relevant information was available. On the night before the attack, Hale conducted a final review of equipment and recorded a farewell video in the bedroom. Hale checked files on digital storage devices and confirmed that the contents were accessible and arranged in the intended format. On the morning of the attack, before leaving the home, Hale left a brief farewell note. After writing a final journal entry, Hale departed. "If I don't survive my massacre, I want my room to be left exactly as it is left. I don't want any of my possessions down in that dingy basement. Please read my will about what to do with my stuffed animals plus possessions. I'm worried what you, plus Scott, will have to go through. But I'm sorry, but it is my time to go. I love you, Aiden." In that morning, Hale left the residence carrying a red bag. When Hale's mother asked what was inside, the question was brushed aside. No one in the household was aware that the bag concealed firearms that would soon be used in the attack. Earlier that morning, at approximately 8 a.m., Hale drove toward Royal Range, USA, the shooting facility where Hale had previously received firearms training. Hale did not intend to enter the range. Instead, Hale parked in a distant and isolated section of the parking lot. There, the firearms were loaded and a tactical vest fitted with additional magazines was put on. Shortly afterward, Hale returned to the vehicle and drove toward the intended target, the Covenant School. Hale arrived at the school at approximately 9:50 a.m. and parked near the west side of the building. For several minutes, Hale remained seated inside the car, hesitating and weighing how to proceed. Before exiting the vehicle, Hale decided to send a final message. Hale first posted a vague message on Instagram directed toward Paige. Then, at 9:57 a.m., Hale sent a direct message that read, "So basically that post I made on here about you, that was basically a suicide note. I am planning to die today. This is not a joke. You will probably hear about me on the news after I die. This is my last goodbye. Love you, see you again in another life." Paige respond, "Audrey, you have so much more life to live. I pray God keeps and covers you." Hale respond, "I know, but I don't want to live. I'm so sorry. I'm not trying to upset you or get attention. I just need to die. I wanted to tell you first because you are the most beautiful person I have ever seen and known all my life. My family doesn't know what I'm about to do. One day this will make more sense. I have left more than enough evidence behind. But something bad is about to happen. Forgive me." Paige reacted with shock to the exchange. Although Paige and Hale had been close during childhood, there had been no contact for years, and Paige did not understand why Hale reached out. Paige immediately contacted an emergency hotline and the sheriff's office. By that point, the plan was already underway. Armed with an AR pistol, a 9mm carbine rifle, and a handgun, Hale approached the school entrance. Hale raised a weapon and fired through the glass doors, shattering the doors, and then entered the building. Inside, school custodian Michael Hill was cleaning a nearby room. After hearing the sound of breaking glass, Michael Hill stepped into the hallway and immediately encountered Hale. After seeing the firearms, Michael Hill turned and attempted to flee. Hale fired multiple shots from the AR pistol, striking Michael Hill in the back. Hale left Michael Hill bleeding on the floor and continued forward. The gunfire activated a ceiling-mounted smoke detector, triggering the fire alarm throughout the school. The alarm caused several doors to unlock automatically. Believing an emergency evacuation was underway, teachers began guiding students out in organized lines. 3 third-grade students, Evelyn Deekhouse, William Kinney, and Hallie Scruggs, all 9 years old, were at the front of one such line, moving toward a stairwell with a substitute teacher, Cynthia Peak. On the stairs, the group encountered Hale. Hale opened fire immediately, striking all 3 children. Cynthia Peak was then shot multiple times. As other students fled, Hale stepped over Cynthia Peak and moved down the hallway. After recognition of an active threat, additional teachers and students retreated into classrooms and barricaded doors in accordance with safety procedures. Hale returned to the previous victims and fired additional shots to ensure the victims would not survive. Hale then moved to several third-grade classroom doors and discharged an entire magazine through the doors. During this burst of gunfire, only 1 student was injured by shrapnel. After determining that this approach was ineffective, Hale reloaded and moved toward the 2nd floor in search of additional victims. At that time, the head of school, Catherine Kuntz, left the administrative office to investigate the source of the alarm. Catherine Kuntz encountered Hale and asked what was happening. Hale did not respond and instead fired a volley of bullets. After, Catherine Kuntz collapsed. Hale approached and fired 2 additional shots at close range. Hale then switched to the rifle and searched nearby church offices. Several staff members were hiding under desks and inside cabinets, but Hale did not notice anyone and left the area. Hale entered the chapel sanctuary, which featured a large stained glass depiction of Adam and Eve. Hale fired 7 rounds into the stained glass. From a nearby window, Hale observed police vehicles arriving outside. Because the fire alarm was extremely loud, the sound of approaching officers was largely masked. Hale fired from the window toward the officers and the vehicles. No officers were injured, although several police vehicles were disabled.
Just got an update. It's going to be 1st floor, main lobby of what?
I'm making entry on the front side. I got a civilian that's putting me in here.
Kids are all locked down, but we have 2 kids that we don't know where they are.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Into my window, so they're upstairs.
Hey. Give me 3. Let's get 3.
All the way down this hall. Listen, it's Fellowship Hall. The end of this hall is Fellowship Hall. They just said they heard gunshots down there, and then upstairs are a bunch of kids.
Let's go. I need 3.
One more!
Let's go. Metro Police!
Open door! On me! We don't know where he is! Metro Police! Open door! Bathroom, small bathroom. Clear.
Next. Let's go. Door. With me.
Hold the door!
Next.
This.
Open it. I got it. I got it.
Bathroom.
Let's go.
Come out. Go right now. Let's go.
Just move right. Hover left. Hover left. Take this with me. Take this. No, that's locked. Take this door. Take this door. Take it. It's upstairs. It sounds like it's upstairs.
Go. Push the LPV up. Reloading. Clear. Move. Watch out. Stop moving. Get your hand away from the gun. Watch left. Get your hand away from the gun. Secondaries provide security. Hey, hold the air. Go. They go second floor.
I don't have a radio closet. Give me enough.
No, locked door. Where did they go in? First floor. Hold there, y'all. Somebody hold there. Hit that door. Rifle first. Blue, go. Go. Move. I'm with you. Go left. Straight.
Right here.
It's locked. Go. Hit that stair. Hit the stairs. Go. Those stairs. Go.
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 One down.
Keep pushing. Push with LPVO. Go right. Move! Watch out! Move. Stop moving! Watch left! Suspect down! Secondaries provide security! Hey, hold.
Hale was struck 4 times, once in the arm, once in the thigh, once in the chest, and once in the head. Investigators later determined that Hale fired a total of 152 rounds during the attack, 126 from the AR pistol, 25 from the rifle, and 1 from the handgun. Hale was still carrying 272 rounds of ammunition, indicating that the attack could have continued for a significantly longer period had law enforcement not intervened. After confirming that there were no additional attackers, detectives located Hale's vehicle in the parking area at approximately 12:15 p.m. Officers approached the vehicle and determined that there were no explosives on or inside it. Using the vehicle registration documents, investigators identified Hale's personal and address information. Without delay, detectives proceeded to Hale's residence and initiated surveillance of the property. At 1:04 p.m., Hale's father was observed leaving the residence and was taken into custody for questioning. Detectives secured the residence and the surrounding area. After confirming that there were no immediate threats inside, officers withdrew and maintained security while awaiting a search warrant. At 2 p.m., detectives made contact with Hale's mother and conducted an interview regarding the Covenant attack. Acting under the authority of a search warrant, investigators began searching the residence. At 3:21 p.m., investigative teams also began search and examination procedures at the Covenant School to collect evidence related to the homicides. Hale's vehicle was transported to the MNP DC Crime Laboratory for forensic examination. Following detailed examinations of Hale's vehicle and residence, investigators documented and seized a large quantity of materials. The recovered items are summarized as follows: 16 notebooks, personal journals written by Hale. 2 notebooks were recovered from the vehicle, and 14 were found in the bedroom. Various printed and handwritten documents, 7 sketchbooks and composition books, printed archival material, digital and media storage devices, electronic devices, 6 mobile phones and 3 laptop computers, cloud storage and social media accounts. Investigative authorities specifically noted that the volume of information left behind by Hale was substantially greater than what is typically encountered in a criminal investigation. Due to the extensive scope and chronological nature of these materials, detectives were able to reconstruct Hale's life history and attack preparations in far greater detail than is possible in many similar cases. Subsequent analysis determined that not all seized materials were directly connected to the attack. In particular, 1 laptop recovered from the living room was confirmed to belong to Hale's mother, and several VHS tapes along with 2 USB flash drives were identified as belonging to Hale's brother. These items were excluded from further forensic evaluation. Upon completion of all investigative phases, authorities reached the final conclusion that the primary motivation for the attack was the desire for social notoriety and to leave a permanent mark, while chronic failures in personal relationships, unmet career expectations, and an inability to achieve independence contributed to the deepening of Hale's depression. Investigators determined that these factors alone were insufficient to explain the attack. Hale explicitly addressed this distinction in personal writings, stating that if the sole objective had been to end life, this could have been done without harming others. The most consistently recurring theme in Hale's writings and video recordings was the belief that death needed to have meaning and should never be forgotten. Hale believed that an ordinary suicide would fade into obscurity and instead fixated on the lasting notoriety associated with the Columbine attackers. In these records, Hale expressed admiration for what Hale described as their godlike status, reinforcing the desire to attain a similarly distorted form of recognition, regardless of whether that recognition took the form of hatred. This reflects Hale's own warped and pathological perception, rather than any objective reality. In the final stage of the investigation, evidence conclusively established that the attack was carried out entirely alone. Collected evidence revealed no indication of accomplices, external direction, or organizational support during the planning or execution of the attack. No third party was identified as having assisted in concealing evidence or influencing the course of events. The prosecuting authority formally confirmed that no living individual bears criminal responsibility for the attack. Because the perpetrator died at the scene, the Covenant case was legally closed under an exceptional circumstance designation, and the investigation was concluded. If anyone is considering a similar path, this must be clearly understood. Such acts are not a message, and they are never a solution. The only outcome is irreversible destruction, suffering, and silenced lives. Nothing presented in this file represents strength. None of it produces courage, meaning, or permanence. It produces only loss. Violence does not justify anyone. It does not elevate any belief, and it does not make any life meaningful. Real strength lies not in destruction, but in stopping, in asking for help, and in continuing to live. This is not a story. It's a warning. Before we move forward, it is important to honor the innocent lives lost in this tragedy. These were children, teachers, and members of a community, people with dreams, families, and futures that were taken far too soon. A story like this should never be defined by the person who committed the crime. Instead, it should remind us of the lives that were lost and the families who continue to live with this pain. Please take a moment to remember the victims and reflect on the impact of this tragedy. Their lives mattered, and their memories deserve to be honored and remembered.